The neo-western has always been a slippery genre to define. It's a space where cowboy codes meet modern-day cynicism, where lone gunslingers trade horses for cars and dusty towns for small cities. However, the opening minutes of Justified's pilot episode, Fire in the Hole, pin it down better than any critic or scholar ever could. The show would go on to earn a 97% Rotten Tomatoes score, and within minutes, it's obvious exactly why. Although Justified is set in Kentucky, its story begins far from the Appalachian Hills. The pilot's unforgettable opener unfolds nearly 1,000 miles away in the sweltering heat of Miami. It's an odd choice at first glance, a tropical detour that seems disconnected from the show's core, but this is where U.S. Marshal Raylan Givens, Timothy Olyphant, sets everything in motion, triggering the reassignment that sends him back to his old Kentucky home. When it comes to capturing the essence of a genre in its very first moments, Justified is practically unmatched. The neo-western may resist tidy categorization, but in less than 5 minutes, the show proves why it's worth falling in love with. Those opening minutes don't just define Justified, they define an entire style of storytelling. The first ever scene of Justified captured everything that makes neo-westerns great. The opening minutes of Justified distilled decades of western tropes into a modern masterpiece. The pilot episode of Justified, Fire in the Hole, opens not in the rolling hills of Kentucky but amid the gleaming skyline of Miami. The camera tracks Raylan Givens as he approaches a rooftop pool with the slow, deliberate gait of a classic gunslinger. However, instead of a saloon, there are poolside umbrellas. Instead of tumbleweeds, there are sunbathers sipping cocktails. Raylan's target is Tommy Bucks, Peter Green, a mob-connected gunrunner who's been given 24 hours to leave town. Their exchange feels ripped straight from a mid-century western, terse, polite, and humming with tension. Raylan's ultimatum, "You don't get out of town in 24 hours, I'm going to shoot you on sight," lands like a line from High Noon. Tommy laughs it off, lounging back in his chair like a man who doesn't believe in legends anymore. The scene unfolds with exquisite patience. Every shot, from Raylan's hand brushing the holster to the sun bouncing off the Miami high-rises, evokes the mythic mood of an old western duel, just updated for a modern crime setting. When the inevitable happens, and Raylan's quick draw settles the matter, it's a moment that feels both timeless and completely new. And in just a few minutes, Justified shows how the western can thrive outside its natural habitat. There are no cattle drives or desert vistas here, yet everything about the scene, the moral code, the quiet tension, the unspoken threat, screams western. It's a genre reborn under neon light. The opener doesn't just introduce a character, it reintroduces a storytelling tradition that had been drifting for decades. The scene also lays down the DNA of Justified itself. Raylan isn't a cowboy from another century. He's a modern lawman who acts like one anyway. His old-school sense of justice, his effortless cool, and his simmering danger all collide in this single Miami showdown. By the time the credits roll, viewers know exactly what kind of story they're in for, a neo-western that knows its roots but isn't afraid to rewrite the rules. Why the Justified pilot was a masterstroke of genre storytelling. The first scene blended old-school western grit with sleek modern crime drama flair. The brilliance of Justified's opening scene lies in how naturally it fuses the old and the new. It begins with a silhouette of Raylan, his hat tipped low, standing against the bright Miami sky. It's cinematography that feels straight out of a Clint Eastwood classic. However, this time, the lone cowbody lawman surrounded by people in swimsuits, sun loungers, and steel skyscrapers. That's the neo in neo-western, a timeless grit reinvented for a thoroughly modern world. Raylan's dialogue feels ripped from a dusty saloon, not a Florida rooftop. Lines like, "You tell M about the man you killed," have the rhythm of cinematic western folklore. However, they're spoken in a place where mobsters sip mojitos. Tommy Bucks himself could have stepped out of The Sopranos, not The Magnificent Seven. This contrast, cowboy stoicism colliding with modern criminal decadence, is where Justified finds its magic. The quick-draw standoff at the end of the scene doesn't just resolve the pilot's first conflict, it declares the show's mission statement. Justified is about what happens when the old code of the West meets the blurred morality of the 21st century. The genius of this opening is that it gives the audience both instant gratification and long-term intrigue. In under 5 minutes, viewers see everything that defines Raylan Givens, his calm under pressure, his belief in personal justice, and his readiness to act. However, he's also the kind of man who doesn't fit into the modern world of law enforcement. By the time Raylan is reassigned to Kentucky, Justified has already proven its mastery of tone. The Miami sequence could have felt jarring or disconnected, but instead, it elegantly bridges classic Western iconography with contemporary crime drama aesthetics. The setting might be new, but the myth feels ancient. It's the kind of scene that hooks audiences instantly, not with spectacle, but with precision. Every line, every shot, every pause is calibrated to remind audiences why Westerns once ruled Hollywood, and why they still have something vital to say. Justified didn't just revive the Western, it redefined it for a generation. Justified could easily have fumbled its opening moments. The Miami prologue made sure viewers saw it as more than a modern Western imitation. If Justified had opened in Kentucky, it might have been a completely different show. Dropping straight into Harlan County could have made it feel like a Western pastiche. Modern guns, modern cars, but the same old Southern drawl and six-shooter swagger. Instead, the Miami prologue ensured Justified announced itself as something sharper, smarter, and more self-aware. The sunny, colorful setting immediately set it apart. Westerns traditionally thrive in dusty browns and fading golds, but Justified opened in a place of glass towers and turquoise pools. The brightness only made Raylan's shadow longer, his cowboy silhouette even more pronounced. The contrast wasn't just visual, it was philosophical. The old ways no longer belonged here, and Raylan's code was out of place before the story even began. That sense of displacement became Justified's central theme. The Miami opener was the perfect way to show Raylan as a man who doesn't quite fit. Not in Florida, not in Kentucky, maybe not anywhere. It's what makes his character so compelling and what keeps the series grounded even as it plays with pulpy shootouts and high-stakes showdowns. From a storytelling standpoint, this was a bold move. Starting with a scene that feels disconnected from the show's main setting risks confusing viewers. However, in hindsight, it's what gives the show its edge. Justified isn't just about lawmen and criminals, it's about moral codes surviving in places they no longer belong. In today's era of streaming, that opening sequence has only aged better. Viewers deciding whether to stick around after a few minutes are instantly pulled in by a complete mini-movie.